Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love by Is This Self-Care? Narrated by S.E.P. Author notes. About the mole, I gave you one single paltry, not even clue about her in Chapter 1. I am horrible, I know. We now know who pissed in her pixie puffs anyway. Adult content warning. This chapter is the culmination of almost a year of sexual frustration for our dear couple and therefore almost entirely smut. In order to stay within YouTube's community guidelines, I will be reading the edited version. For the full smutty version, please head to Spotify. Chapter 35. Dynamic Fluid Exchanges, a Practical Model. The innocence of the kiss turned to something heavier as Draco made good on his promise to snog the living daylights out of Granger. She ran her fingers through his hair. He backed her into a tree. She had his collar in her fist and was using that as leverage to either pull him in closer or pull herself up higher, with the pleasurable result of tongue on tongue. Draco felt the lack of the ring. He had grown accustomed to the thing keeping him apprised of Granger's heart rate. He solved the problem by finding pulse points along her throat with his mouth, which gave him a much more immediate and tactile accounting of her feelings. Her eyes were closed, her hair caught in birch bark. Her pulse was a delicate, harried flutter against his lips. He could have taken her right there, against the tree, but she was Granger, and all that was good and wonderful in the world, and she deserved better. Now one of her legs was around him. He hoisted her up higher, one hand on her arse, and pressed himself against her. I think I should like to, perhaps, go back inside, gasped Granger with a kind of questioning, as though he would say anything but yes, God's yes. I want you, said Draco into her mouth, in all senses of the term. All of them. Well, shall we? Shall we begin with one? Yes, the lowest common denominator, said Draco. He pushed his cock into her harder, in case his meaning was not resoundingly clear. Will you accompany me to my rooms? Don't you mean your chambers? Asked Granger in a breathy drawl. Draco took her hand and began to pull her towards the manor. Don't be cheeky, or I shall make you regret it. Granger smiled at him. He stopped to kiss her hard. They stumbled back to the manor, hand in hand. They crept upstairs through the back stairway near the kitchens, like naughty teenagers, to avoid being seen by their multitude of guests. Upstairs, Granger looked about Draco's rooms curiously, passing through the sitting room, the dressing room, peeking into the bathroom, and finally coming to the bedroom. What are you smiling about? Asked Granger, looking at Draco over her shoulder. He was smiling. Oh? Draco closed the door behind him and flung up a few words. It is delightful to finally have you here in person. Have I been here in other states? Asked Granger, running her hand up the bedpost, which shouldn't have been as provocative as it was. Draco laid himself on the bed. Many. Dream versions of you, terribly naughty fantasy versions of you. You must tell me about the latter. Draco wanted to follow up with something clever and sexy, but Granger chose that moment to shed her shawl and expose her hideous pajamas. Gods, said Draco, instead of the clever and sexy thing. Whatever is the matter? Asked Granger. Don't you like these? Am I curdling your jizz? You are a vision, said Draco. Granger ran a seductive hand down her tartan-lined hip. Aren't I? Take me, I'm yours. You mustn't say things like that unless you mean them. I do mean them. Well then, said Draco, come here. I must divest you of those things before we go any further. Granger clambered onto the bed. I thought they added a bit of Scottish panache. The Scots have no panache. Don't put those words together. They've got loads of panache. I am going to buy you so many inappropriate muggly negligee things that you will have a new one to wear every night. He began to undo her buttons. Likewise, said Granger, observing his progress. Theo's pajamas inspired me. We can find you something even better. Something with a penis hatch. A penis hatch? Yes, for ease of accessibility. A little opening. Little? I'm sorry. A gaping opening. A veritable chasm. Oh. It had been, all told, a winning start to the day. They settled into one another's arms and fell into a nap. Judging by the angle of the sun, it was only about 10 o'clock in the morning when Draco awoke. He took an unusual groggy delight in the feeling of warm and sticky, because it was Granger who he felt warm and sticky with. Her robe had opened and exposed a thigh that looked delicious. He pushed himself up and kissed it. Granger, far away in some distant peaceful dream, slept on. Draco had been about to lie back down when he realized that he was being watched. Granger's cat was at the foot of the bed, staring at him. "How the bloody hell do you keep getting in here?" whispered Draco. "I've got wards up." The cat's blink told him that this was no concern of his. "Right. Well, as you can see, things have progressed," said Draco, attempting to cover Granger's thigh with her robe. The cat's long stare informed him that it had indeed taken note, and that any progress was in fact its doing, given that Draco was largely a useless imbecile. Draco could offer payment in the form of kippered herring at breakfast. "You weren't really lost, were you? That one time? And the other night, you weren't really chasing a leaf." "No," said the cat. "Of course not." Draco was a bumbler, and at some point a cat simply runs out of patience. The twitch of the cat's tail informed Draco that, by the by, the consequences would be dire for him should he bollocks this up. Frankly, the cat intimidated Draco far more than Potter and Weasley. The cat actually had the gumption to carry out its threats. Draco pulled a sheet over himself, feeling that the old sausage and beans were rather too exposed, with those claws at this level of proximity. "I shan't bollocks it up," whispered Draco. "I can't bollocks it. I care for her far too much. It's a horrid feeling." The yellow eyes stared at him. "What else do you want me to tell you? She has the entirety of my stupid heart, all right? I can't hurt her. I'd sooner rip out my soul." Still, the stare continued. "I love her." That's what it wanted to hear. The cat wound its way towards him on the bed. Draco slid a protective hand in front of his crotch, in case it got any ideas. The cat observed the movement. Its glance toward Draco told him that, if it were to carry out its revenge, it would go for his eyes first anyway. Then nipples. It had sharpened its claws for that purpose. But for now, that was unnecessary. They could be friends. It butted its head at his chest, curled its tail under his chin. Draco spat out a single cat hair, presumably placed upon his tongue to ensure that he knew his place. Granger awoke to find Draco scratching the cat's ears. "Oh," she said. "He's approved of me," said Draco with a few provisions. "Provisions? They're between him and me. Can't disclose." "All right," Granger smiled widely. "You know, I did have it on good authority that you're a good man, under all the dickheadery. But now... It's irrefutable, isn't it?" "Yes, Theo's findings have been peer-reviewed, as it were." The cat began to knead Draco's thigh, too close to his crotch for comfort. Another intimidation tactic, no doubt. Granger saw Draco's eyes widen and came to the rescue. She picked up the cat and gave it a kiss on its ugly head before sending it on its merry way through the door. "I still want to know how he's getting in," said Draco. "Should have worked that out into your provisions," said Granger. "I am so pleased that you're getting along." "I'm not sure it's the most egalitarian of getting-alongs. You sound as though he had something terrible on you. He threatened to go after my nipples. Should I, in any way, displease you?" Granger laughed and pressed a kiss into one of his nipples in question. "I shall keep you safe." "Thank you. I can't decide whether the cat or the prioress terrifies me more at the moment." "Newmarket it is." "Not quite," said Draco. He had an entirely new terror there. Granger yawned. "Shall we have a shower and give the others a sign of life?" "No," said Draco selfishly. "I think we ought to, or Harry and Ron might burst in next. It's one thing for that cryptid of yours to get in, but if those two bumblers get through my wards, I'd know I was losing my touch." "You were a bit distracted when you were casting them," said Granger. She then proceeded to distract him again by walking to the bathroom and letting the robe slip off as she went. All other issues lost their significance over chasing Granger's bare bum. "Again?" gasped Granger as Draco ran for her and pushed his half-hard self against her. "Obviously. Still plenty of life in the old bag." As they entered the bathroom, Draco caught sight of himself in the mirror. His hair looked like a pineapple. In a moment of real personal growth, he discovered he didn't really care. They showered, amongst other naughty things. Then, because Granger desired it, they went downstairs to give the requisite sign of life. That night, when everyone, but particularly Potter and Weasley, had fucked off, Draco joined Granger in her rooms. By then, they had got the worst of their randiness out of their systems, and they were able to take it slow, and it was something rather more akin to making love. There was such pleasure in it. Not raw, carnal pleasure, that had been found several times that morning, but something intimate, and slow, and sweet. They undressed each other with care and caress. She took off his braces and cufflinks with a soft smile upon her face. He pulled the hairpins from her hair, all except one, out of her lingering paranoia. She unbuttoned his shirt. He lifted her top off. When they were both naked, he lay her onto the pillows with that lovely chaos of her hair around her, under the light of the waxing moon. She was the enchantress that he had glimpsed a long time ago. He drew his fingers through her hair and felt the impossibility of it, of the realness of his dream vision. He told her that she was beautiful. She told him to kiss her. Their kisses yielded secrets. He told her of his amortentia, and she told him of hers. And they found delightful surprises in one another's answers, of flying, and the sea, and roses, and his hair, and desert sands, and her soap, and his cologne, and honeyed cider and cherries, bits and pieces and memories and moments that had brought them together. He told her what he thought of her when he cast a Patronus. She told him of her puzzle, of paradoxes now solved. It was a gentle delirium of stupidities and vulnerabilities. They made love in it, whispering once, long unvoiced, into each other's ear. Their hearts thudded and surged, their mouths reaped and harvested kisses, and when they spun over the edge together, they gasped out each other's names.